Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare Du Re Soha. Om Tare Du Tare.
What a joy it is to be with all of you this evening. This teaching that we've been covering for this last few months, the Four Noble Truths, this incredible commentary by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, has just been a precious gift to me, and I hope it has been to you as well. Tonight we are going to wrap up the fundamental aspects of this particular teaching, going over the advice of His Holiness on engaging in these practices. And hopefully you'll have some time for a little discussion afterward and to support each other in our practice of cultivating wisdom, compassion, a path of understanding, and a path of no more suffering, a path of liberation. So with no further ado, let's go ahead and take a look at the text here. Advice on following the Buddhist path. And this is, again, from His Holiness, the 14th Dalai Lama. There are 3 pieces of advice I would like to share with you. The first is to say that unless you are able to establish a firm grounding in the basic practices of Buddha Dharma, such as those I have outlined, then even the supposedly profound practices of the Vajrayana will have no effect. The point is that for a practicing Buddhist, it's really vital to develop an understanding of the Four Noble Truths and to meditate upon them. Meditation should therefore be an essential part of your practice and include both shamatha and vipassana. So here we want to just really get what he's saying. So important. So many times people want to, what's the most profound practice? What's the highest yogic tantric practice? What's the highest Mahayana practices? I want to go to these blessings. I want to receive these empowerments. And His Holiness is pointing out here, that is really not going to be much help at all. The practice is foundational in the primary fundamental teaching of the Buddha, the Four Noble Truths. In fact, that is the whole teaching. And there is teaching and there is practices. We've talked about that before. A lot of people engage in a lot of practices, Buddhist practices, and unless they have the context of the teaching, the understanding of what the practices are to accomplish, how they support you in understanding the teachings and realizing the essence of the teachings, they're really not going to be much help. And so His Holiness is going right to what we had covered last week with the question at the end was, do I need to engage in all these profound, subtle practices? Or how does a beginner, get involved? And the answer was whether you consider yourself a beginner or a practitioner of, decades. Really, the practice is the Four Noble Truths and the practice of transforming my life into this practice of understanding myself and my experience, true causes of suffering, true causes of joy, lasting happiness. That realization is really going to be vital. I know many people that have dedicated their lives to some profound practices and have still struggled with very basic patience and acceptance of life on life's terms. And I've known people with very profound practices that have no hook or attachment or worry or fear, and live in a way that is just fluid and vibrant and alive and joyful and compassionate. And I know people who have received absolutely no training whatsoever in these deep, profound, subtle practices that live with meaning and understanding and purpose and resiliency and joy. The difference is between one way of living and the other is what's found in the Four Noble Truths. The Four Noble Truths is simply stating the nature of reality, the nature of the cause of suffering, the nature of the causes of joy, of freedom, of genuine happiness, and understanding this dynamic of impermanence and interdependence, and how our afflicted grasping on and attaching to people and events in ways that they don't exist, expecting them to offer us the joys or the struggles, that it's coming independently from those people and events. Unless I really understand and get that, that's not the sources of my suffering or my joy. It's not the true causes. They are conditions from which my joy or my struggles arise. But those seeds are planted within my consciousness. The ultimate causes are based on misperception and habits and conditioning, these karma and kleshas that were discussed in these Four Noble Truths. Well, when I get that, and that is a steady, long-term practice that I've been engaged in with for decades now. I mean, that's my primary practice, is these Four Noble Truths. Well, the more I've come to realize this on some degree of understanding, the more my suffering has been reduced, the more resiliency is increased, the more ability I have to recognize the nature of things, the more free I am to fully engage in my life. And then those other practices that I've received, they become supportive. So what he's saying here is, don't go rushing to all these practices, and focus on the primary understanding of the Four Noble Truths. This can take lifetimes. And he said here very clearly that your practices should include meditation. That's a key. You'll notice meditation in all Buddhist genres, Theravadan, Zen Buddhism, the Tibetan Buddhism, the Jnana path. It's always has a focus on meditation, but he said specifically should include both shamatha practice, calm abiding, and vipassana practice, insight meditation. So here is his direct advice. Number one, first and foremost, this is your practice. This is the foundation. You don't actually need these other things of the more subtle, profound, or different types of empowerments to achieve awakening. The Four Noble Truths has it. It has the truth path, has everything. Those other types of practices, whether it's in whatever tradition, Zen or the Tibetan or Theravada, whatever other practices, they're all meant to simply support your understanding of these Four Noble Truths and this path of awakening. But primarily, shamatha, without shamatha, it's stated in our text that it's just going to be nearly impossible to achieve any real lasting awakening. Shamatha is a practice of cultivating attention, presence of mind. It's how we tame that busy, obsessive, compulsive, delusional mind. We tame it with shamatha practice. you started this teaching today with a shamatha practice. I always take a little time to cultivate some attention, some presence of mind. Those of you that do the morning practice with me every day in our practice is a shamatha practice. How can I really cultivate any understanding or wisdom if I'm caught up constantly in an obsessive, compulsive, untamed mind? So daily practice, shamatha, should be a part of every daily practice. And then the other practice of vipassana insight meditation, so he's recommending here, then we also take some time to meditate and reflect upon the meaning of these teachings and gain some insight. And that can be as straightforward as, tonight you might hear something that is meaningful. It comes from the Four Noble Truths, and take some time to bring it to mind, reflect upon it, analyze it. The teachings on wisdom, of acquiring wisdom, are three types of wisdom. The wisdom of hearing the teaching. So that's what's happening right now, hopefully. You're hearing the teaching, you're taking it in. And then the wisdom of analyzing a teaching, contemplating a teaching, bringing it to mind. So we hear a teaching, we get this instruction, and then we take some time. Like right now, I'm seated in nice posture. I'll bring to mind a teaching, and I'll contemplate it. What's it mean? Is it true? Does it hold up to analysis? What about this? What about that? And so this analytical process of analyzing a teaching, we call it analytical meditation, is to really poke at it. And then out of that, some truth arises, some realization, and then we meditate on that, letting that realization sink in. And in that way, a teaching goes from an intellectual understanding to a realization, an understanding. So this approach of shamatha, to stabilize, to tame the mind, to be able to be present in my life, to become mindful, and that's how I become mindful, is with shamatha practice. So I can be present, attentive to whether I'm listening to a teaching or I'm engaged at work or I'm talking to someone, fully present, clear, attentive, mindful of my motivations, my interactions, so I can be healthy and wise in my activities, cultivating the causes of well-being instead of suffering. And then taking some real time to read, reflect, contemplate, and meditate on these teachings. And in that way, they're going to become a part of our experience. What I water grows. And so often we may go to a teaching and, and that's here we are, Teaching Wednesday, but, what's happening on Friday? And what's happening in between? Sometimes you come into teaching trying to remember, what is it we covered last week? So what he's encouraging here is to fully engage every day in a process of bringing to mind these teachings, of taming the mind, of meditation. What I pay attention to becomes my reality. So if I'm spending some time reflecting on these teachings, well, that is present in my mind. But if I spend just a little time on these and the rest of my time caught up in obsessive, compulsive busyness of worldly activities and chaos and stress and worry and fear, I'm actually creating the causes of samsara instead of liberation. And then I come to the teachings and I'm trying to get some relief. And maybe I get a little relief and then I go back out. And then I stir up the suffering. So we want a full therapeutic process, not one in which I continually injure myself. And that's a metaphor, injuring my mind, heart, body, experience, illness of samsara, and then try to take a prescription, right? A little prescription. I take my little pill and have some alleviation, and then go back out and keep creating the illness. Rather, how about I take the prescription and get into my physical therapy and apply the prescription in my daily life. And so I want to bring it to mind again and again, have a full therapeutic process. There's no shortcut here. And he'll talk more about that here in this next bit of advice. Pop that up. Another important factor is your determination. You should not imagine that all these developments can take place within a few days or a few years. They may even take several eons. So determination is evidently vital. If you consider yourself a Buddhist and want to really practice Buddha Dharma, then right from the start, you must make up your mind to do so until the end, regardless of whether it takes millions or billions of eons. After all, what is the meaning of your life? In itself, there's no intrinsic meaning. However, if we use life in a positive way, then even the days and the months and the eons can become meaningful. On the other hand, if you just fritter your life away aimlessly, then even one day feels too long. You will find that once you have a firm determination and a clear objective, then then time is not important. As Shantideva writes in this beautiful prayer, for as long as space exists and sentient beings endure, may I too remain to dispel the misery of the world. His words really convey a certain understanding to me, and they are so inspiring. His Holiness here is making such an important point. What's the meaning of your life? What's your purpose? And whether you consider yourself a Buddhist, a Christian, Jewish, whatever your religion, a humanist, what are you doing to make your life meaningful? If that is what I believe, are my actions aligning to what I believe? Specifically in a Buddhist path, we have the opportunity to transform this very experience into a path of liberation and freedom and benefit all sentient beings. And he's saying, wow, if you have that purpose, there is no worry about time. Every day is a gift. Every day is a precious opportunity to cultivate merit, wisdom, to grow, to learn, to be of benefit, to understand yourself, your experience. And every day is incredibly meaningful. You understand your impact. I was at a different meeting, a different teaching, one in recovery, and a young woman was speaking. We asked this question, what's the purpose of your life? What are you living for? And she shared, this was very early in recovery, she shared, she thought about if she were to die today, would it matter? Would the world even notice? Would there just be some bad feelings? Was the world harmed because of her life? And she thought about it in those terms, and then she thought, well, I can live in a way that I understand that how my interactions, how they are, have an impact. And I can live in such a way that the world's a better place because I was in it. Because if I live in a way that is supportive of good ethics and honesty and value and recovery, well, that's going to have an impact. And others will be impacted. And so what she came up with is what she is living for is to have a positive impact in the world. And so there's a clear purpose that when we die, we can recognize that there's nothing to suffer, there's nothing to worry about, that we've lived a life that's meaningful, that is, in fact, a life that has benefited the world that we experience. And here with this Buddhist, now he's going to a Mahayana, a Bodhisattva path, that as I cultivate wisdom, as I cultivate understanding, I am much more able to benefit all others and to help them remove their suffering. I cultivate qualities within myself that are meaningful, that are wise, that are compassionate, that have loving kindness as a basis. And with that, I am going to be much more capable of having a healthy, positive impact on the lives of anyone I touch, and not just the ones I directly touch, but all those who come behind me. And to bring this into a full cycle of understanding, here we are on a Wednesday night. We have a life today because of countless others who centuries ago devoted their lives to cultivating their highest qualities and their aspirations and their prayers and their dedications and their efforts. They built monasteries, they translated texts, they offered education, and whether they were Buddhists or not, or Christian or of other religions, or of atheists, or people who built roads, or people who created paper, or people who taught in schools, all have contributed to the life that we have today, to be here in this moment with access to teachings asking us to explore the truth of our existence and our opportunity to be a benefit to others. We're benefiting from their efforts, and likewise, others will benefit from our efforts. And so as we come to a conviction, there's no rush. There is, oh, I have a purpose. And it doesn't matter how long it takes, because every day is making a difference. Every day is growth. It's not about the end result. It's about the journey. And every day is an opportunity to grow, to learn, to cultivate merit and wisdom, understanding of myself, my experience, and to be a benefit. Now, we may not have that clear, firm conviction as a Buddhist path yet, or maybe we won't ever. But the invitation in the Four Noble Truths is not to become a Buddhist to become a Buddhist. The invitation in the Four Noble Truths really doesn't say anything about being a Buddhist. It actually asks us to understand suffering, the causes of suffering, and how to eliminate suffering. And the answer is to cultivate practices to understand more accurately who we are and how we experience life. The conclusion here within the Four Noble Truths is that all this mental and emotional suffering has arisen because of misunderstanding of myself and my experience. Now, it's either true or it's not true. Right? It's either true or it's not true. And the invitation is to explore these teachings to find out if they're true or not for you. Ultimately, the Buddhist path is one of exploring the nature of existence, the nature of truth. Dharma, one very good definition of Dharma is truth. Truth. So then the refuge that we take is a refuge in the truth. Dharma, the realizations and understanding of self and experience. The Buddha that helped provide these teachings. A refuge is something we can rely upon, something that's safe. And the Sangha is all of those who have engaged in this path, the support team, that have achieved these realizations, that have dedicated their lives and made a commitment to help these teachings and practices be here for others to recognize their ultimate nature, their true nature. So it doesn't require any blind faith, doesn't require a belief system, even in afterlife. What it requires is a clear, discerning mind to explore the very nature of your experience. And in that journey, analyze, see what's true. So the first step here then in this path, whether we want to label ourselves Buddhist or not, is I can be dedicated to eliminating suffering in my life and exploring the very nature of my existence and a desire to be committed to cultivating happiness and well-being for myself and others. And then our lives have an incredible meaning and purpose. And it doesn't matter how long that takes. And days don't get too long. Matter of fact, days are a precious gift. And the third point, short and to the point, but really critical. My final point is that the more impatient you are and the more you want the way that is quickest, cheapest, or best, the more likely you are to obtain a poor result. So I suggest this is the wrong approach. Oh, such powerful advice. It's so common to want, what's the best path? What's the quickest path? I once, His Holiness was asked once, what is, the least amount of time I can meditate, to achieve enlightenment? What's the least, amount of time and energy that I can engage in this to get these benefits? And His Holiness, practically cried hearing that. It's such a such sadness to think, wow, what is the absolute least I can do to understand my life and to make my life meaningful and to transform my experience? And yet that's the common question, what's the quick way? What's the easiest way? I see it. I was just, on YouTube, I was posting one of these teachings, and there I saw it, how to eliminate depression in 2 minutes, and then it's like, what? Wow, you can eliminate depression in 2 minutes. How to lose belly fat, in 5 minutes a day, and here's this, and when we look at our commercials and advertisements and what people are selling, everybody's selling the quickest, easiest, least effortful way of achieving whatever it is and making these fantastical claims. It's sad. It's counterintuitive to meaning and purpose and understanding, and it's counter to how life is. That if I want the results to transform my life, I need to create the causes to transform my life. And so he's saying here, let's not, what's this quick blessing? I mean, people all the time want this empowerment. If I do this one thing, then, all my obscurations are removed. Or if I, go do this retreat thing or this event, then, I'll be like that. In truth, transforming our whole experience and wiring, all those knots, untangling all those knots is a better way of putting it, takes time and consistency. There's a real clear teaching on, if I go deep into a forest, let's in this analogy, the forest is of confusion, of habits, of conditioning, of suffering. I'm 10 miles in. Well, in order to get out, I'm going to have to, get 10 miles out, right? If I go 10 miles in, I'm going to need 10 miles out. Of course, somebody's thinking, well, what if it's only 15 miles and you just keep walking? But that's not the analogy is the further I walk into confusion, the deeper I am. So to get out, I need to apply the same effort and energy. And so if I've spent my whole life cultivating habits and conditioning and reactivity and confusion, well, it's going to take some dedicated effort to unravel those habits and those conditionings and those moments of reactivity and gain understanding. The real, I think, inspiring revelation in the times that we are living in is that now researchers and scientists and neuroscientists can actually watch the change take place. They can watch our brain get rewired. They can watch how our gene expression can be dialed up or down. They can now observe and measure how we can transform our very biological nature, heal ourselves, and re-engage with life in ways that are meaningful and purposeful and become the habits and the conditionings that support such a life. That we can rewire our brains, that new neural pathways can be created, the old ones can be undone. And this is what's been taught for thousands of years, but now we have these tools of measurement. But none of those scientists are saying, I'm going to, get this one little blessing or this one little thing, and your brain and neural pathways, reset. That takes steady, consistent practice and training. And we cultivate long-term traits instead of those little short-term states of pleasure or bliss. And so His Holiness is giving some very clear advice here that let's not try to take a shortcut believing that will actually transform our lives. Let's recognize that every day and every moment of every day is an opportunity to methodically engage in a life in a way that's productive and meaningful and supports a long-term transformation that's stable and sustainable. So those are his 3 bits of advice there. And I think I may have time to have just a deeper piece here in conclusion. If I were to essentialize my talk, I would say that if your understanding of the Four Noble Truths arises from deep reflections such as these, then you will gain a profound admiration for the Dharma, the truth, which is the true refuge. And you will also develop a conviction in the possibility of actualizing the Dharma within yourself, that you can actualize this within your very way of being. On the basis of such conviction, you will be able to develop genuine devotion to the Buddha, the master who showed the path, and you will also have a deep respect for the Sangha members who are your spiritual companions on the path. So if this realization of this path and refuge in the truth arises and you see this potential within yourself, then the devotion, faith, the connection within these teachings, the Buddha who gave these teachings, and our support group of Sangha members, wow, we're going to have a deep, profound respect for those who have engaged in this path and can help guide us. But it'll be born of exploration, of direct experience, of conviction, based on investigation, not on some mythical, legendary kind of a teaching or belief system. This is the way that type of faith arises. If your understanding of the three jewels, that's the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, is based on a realization of the Four Noble Truths that is as profound as this, then whenever you think of the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, they will come alive for you with renewed freshness, right? They're alive, they're vibrant, they're part of your experience. They're never far away. This is what is meant by going for refuge. In fact, to summarize even more succinctly, the whole of the explanation I have given here is to show what is meant by going for refuge in the three jewels. That is the entry point into the Buddhist path, this going for refuge. A refuge, a safe place, something you can rely upon no matter what. Although my own practice is very poor, this is His Holiness speaking. Although my own practice is very poor indeed, and although I recite mantras and visualize certain mandalas, even so, the main emphasis of my daily practice is the Four Noble Truths and bodhicitta, great compassion. These two practices, I feel, are of real practical benefit. Sometimes I think that visualizing deities can almost be like a way of deceiving oneself. In my view, we must pursue practice step by step. With practice and determination. If you practice in this way, then after a year or after a decade, you will notice at least some improvement in yourself. And when you see that, it brings a new encouragement to continue. However, you must realize that change is not all that easy, right? It's, again, sustained practice. And yeah, for the record, you can notice incremental improvements in less than a year. You'll notice ups and downs, but if we engage in this, you will be able to see this transformation. So now that you have read these teachings on the Four Noble Truths, if you consider that you are a Buddhist, then please put them into practice. They should not remain merely on an intellectual level. Practice and teaching must be a part of life. The same applies, of course, to practitioners and believers of other faiths, such as Christians, Muslims, or Jews. Whatever your faith, if you accept that faith, then it must become a part of your life. It's not sufficient to attend church on Sunday and join your hands together in prayer for a few moments if the rest of your behavior remains the same. Right? Covering that a little earlier, right? Whether or not you are physically in a church or a cathedral, I think the teaching of your own religion must be in your heart. That is very important. Only then will you have an experience of it that is of real value. Otherwise, it's simply a piece of knowledge in your head, and when you're faced with problems in life, it won't be of any help. Once the teaching is part of your life, whenever you have a real problem, it gives you inner strength. Also, when you grow old or have an incurable illness, and when death finally comes, then your practice truly gives you some kind of inner guarantee. After all, death's a part of life. There's nothing strange about it. Sooner or later, we will all have to pass through that gate. At that time, whether or not there is life after, it is very valuable to have peace of mind. How can we achieve peace of mind at such a moment? It is possible only if we have some experience in ourselves that will provide us inner strength, because no one else can provide this for us. No deities, no gurus, and no friends. This is why the Buddha says you must be your own master. I think that's clear on its own. Nothing I can add to such wisdom. Okay, well, let's be inspired to put these teachings into practice, to explore. Every day, those of you that are part of the Way of Compassion Dharma community, you know that there is a daily practice that is recorded and that we get to engage in practice every single day to reinvigorate our motivation to engage in a day that comes only once. And if you haven't explored that, I encourage you to take a look. I also encourage you to dive deeply into these Four Noble Truths. Next week, I'll be back, and there's an added section here, teaching by His Holiness on compassion. What he said at the end there was that his primary practices are reflections on the Four Noble Truths and bodhicitta, great compassion. So there's a talk that he gave on compassion that's part of this book, and we will dive into that next week. All right, well, I do hope that you have found our time together meaningful, and I hope that you take a little time to share amongst yourselves, to discuss what you found meaningful about these teachings here. Right now, let's go ahead and dedicate the merit that we have already cultivated in our time together. So valuable for us to dedicate our time to have aspirations that these teachings support us, support others, and remain for the benefit of those who will find their way into this world. Let us begin. By this merit, may I soon attain the enlightened state of Guru Buddha, that I may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind not yet born arise and grow. May that born have no decline but increase forevermore. Thank you all so much for all the good that you bring to the world.
Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om Tare Tu Tare Tu Re Soha. Om